Well, there is a major budget battle brewing in Washington, as you know, and the White House and the GOP are both talking about ways that they can somehow find some common ground on to trim the deficit. They do seem to have pretty different ideas about how to get there so far. This week, Senators Bob Corker and Claire McCaskill are going to announce their plan to dramatically cut spending over the next 10 years. It is very specific, and we're very glad to have Senator Corker here to talk to us about it this morning. Senator, good morning. Good to see you here in Washington.
Good morning to you. Thank you.
So basically, you know, a lot of folks are saying nobody has specifics. Everybody wants to cut the deficit. Everyone wants to cut spending, and nobody's laying out a plan to do that. You're trying to do that. What's the number one point that you want to get across?
I think people who observed Washington, I've been here 4 years, and it's pretty stunning. Congress has to be on a straitjacket. There has to be some mechanism to cause us to have discipline. And so if you look at spending in relation to our overall economy, which is what we're doing with this bill, you take it from where we are today at 24% of the GDP down to 20.6, which has been the 40-year average. But with that comes harsh measures. If Washington doesn't act, if Congress doesn't act, then OMB actually sequesters or takes money out of both mandatory and non-mandatory spending. So it's something, again, to put Washington in a straitjacket.
So one of the ways that you want to do that, for the first time, according to your plan, you would eliminate the deceptive off-budget distinction of Social Security that would provide a complete and accurate assessment of all federal spending. So explain what that means to folks.
Well, right now, we don't really, Medicare and Social Security, a lot of items are not dealt with. We really, in Congress, only deal with about $1 trillion worth of spending. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's those things other than the accounts you're talking about. This would mean that we'd have to have a plan to bring all of that spending down to 20
touching
points.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, bringing them in. More than 50% of the budget goes to those three items,
Absolutely.
right?
A huge part of the budget does, and the fact is that when you just talk about discretionary spending, you're not really dealing with the problem. And so this would mean that we would have to redesign those programs for the long haul. We'd have to make those decisions that need to be made. These cuts wouldn't begin taking place, cuts in the spending, not necessarily in Medicare and Social Security. We can redesign those programs, okay? And that's
what you're going to tell your constituents when they ask, because this is a politically hot football, and there are so many folks who, work where you work, who are completely unwilling to say that Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid are on the table. What are your constituents back home going to say when you say, I'm willing to make some cuts in those areas?
Well, again, I think they're programmatic redesigns. So many of the changes, for instance, in Social Security would take place so many years down the road to make it actuarially sound that it wouldn't affect people that are getting ready to retire. I think all of us know that health care spending is out of control. That obviously affects Medicare, and so we've got to change the incentives in health care. And so I've had 46 meetings around our state. I've presented this to people. I've shared the fact that we can't just tinker with discretionary spending anymore. We have to look at everything, including defense spending. And I think it's gone over pretty well. There's no question that when you begin talking about specific cuts, that's when people divide. So I'm hoping we'll do three things. I hope that we'll actually vote on some cuts prior to this deficit ceiling vote. Some of the things that were in this Deficit Reduction Commission, I hope we'll actually vote on those. I hope we'll actually put a straitjacket in place where we continue on over this 10 years, taking us down to the 40-year average. And I hope we'll consider some constitutional amendments. So all three of those things are things to me that are important. But, we look at what's happening in Egypt. We talk about unrest around the world. The biggest problem for us as it relates to our security domestically is causing Congress to act maturely. That's
well,
right.
You're talking like a businessman, and I know you were one for many years, 4 years now in Washington. So we're going to follow your progress with this, and we'll see how everything works out with it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Senator Corker.
Thank you.